selecting which politicians will be the one that implements that policy. So the undertone of it, even though we're talking Hitler at the moment and Hitler's dream, the undertone is Marxist. And this has an important connection if you move towards what's happening with the Agenda 21 and the environmental programs, because if you look at where the original base statements were made about preserving the world in this generation for future generations, that basic statement came from one sole source, which was the Communist Manifesto.
So we're talking about sustainable development of Agenda 21 being the program through which the property pirates can take over one's homes, their businesses,
yeah,
and change the configuration of all countries for the benefit of the international banksters.
Absolutely correct. This is a corporate government setting it, a one world corporate government setting itself up, and the idea is to take property from individuals. We will not be allowed to own our own property, and that is to be taken away from us, but the regime does it by encouraging us to do the dirty works.
Are they pirates like the pirates of years gone by? They simply come in and steal our property.
You can call them pirates if you like, but they're just criminals, because these people are lying with what they say, and then with their hand they're actually doing the exact opposite. We know that the next stage is the eugenics program, because we are now already seeing dialogue directed towards reducing population. So we've now got people such as Mr. Porritt, originally from Greenpeace, now saying that the British population should be reduced to 30 million, and this is a few years after the population has been deliberately inflated to near 60 million. So these people are now moving on to the next phase, and if you say to me, do I really mean eugenics, that they are going to selectively cull people, I have absolutely no doubt that that is what is going to happen if we allow it.
Is this eugenics program not in fact what Adolf Hitler began in the Third Reich?
Well, he did. He did, and again, history, when we really look into the historical facts, takes a twist, because if we look at where the Germans started to do terrible things to people, it was in the early programs called the T4 programs, where they started to experiment on physically and mentally disabled people. And before that work began, the people who would handle the victims were trained, the handlers were trained. And what was done is that they were desensitized so that they could take victims from wards, from convents, and from asylums, and use those people for experiments without feeling any compassion or guilt. Now, the training techniques that were used came not from Nazi Germany, but from Britain and within the Tavistock Institute. And this is one of the key factors today, that we can see that the Tavistock Institute, for example, is still driving policy forward, and it is a fact that in Britain we're now seeing very clear evidence that eugenics is being taught in schools.
Now, there was an individual named Adolf Hitler. Did he ever come to these islands?
There is a weight of evidence which says that after the First World War, Hitler fought in the First World War as a corporal in the German army. In fact, he was injured several times, and he also went blind after a gas attack.
There is evidence that you have that Adolf Hitler did in fact come to Great Britain in his early years, and it's rumored that he has gone into an organization called the Tavistock. Or am I incorrect?
Right. The evidence exists. I'd say that I believe that the evidence exists of the following events, and that is that shortly after the end of the First World War, Hitler came to Britain, and he came to Britain to visit a half-sister who at that time was living in Liverpool, and she met Hitler at the station. She was very concerned about him because he was very confused, almost rambling, and he had come to visit her not directly from the coast, but having been the guest of the Tavistock Institute in London. Now, this information that I'm putting forward, I personally still need to see the detail of it, but the weight of opinion of those who have followed the history of Hitler and how he became established are adamant that part of his early training was in London at the Tavistock Institute.
Who specifically runs the Tavistock group? Is this the international banksters, the Rothschilds, the Rockefellers, those who want to Frankenize the world?
Well, this is where life starts to get shades of grey. We know that the Tavistock Institute is consuming huge amounts of money, and from its early days it was given large grants from obviously extremely wealthy people. We know that the Rothschilds and the Rockefellers put money into the system. In particular, Mr. Rockefeller added American money to build up the American Institute of Psychiatry, and that was later to create the Kaiser Wilhelm Institute of Psychiatry in Germany, which was the main institute which began to get involved in those T4 programs, the eugenics for the disabled and the mentally disabled. So the Tavistock Institute, there's a lot of history which we know, but there's also a lot of things we don't know about the detail of the men who put the money into that institute. So in the background we can see events that happen. We don't know the exact people who were driving them, we don't know the exact people who wrote the checks, but we know the Tavistock Institute exists, and we can see in great detail how it has helped promote an agenda to do with the psychiatric industry and also the social industry.
Well, is not the British Constitution Group going to initiate some studies into those areas so we can, or you can, identify the enemy within, and we can be specifically pointing out how they have committed these crimes against humanity and what they intend to do insofar as reducing the population not only of this island but of the world?
Well, we've already started to do this, and across the country now, we will say we, but they're people working independently. There are researchers who are looking into the background of politicians who are currently in power. And when we do this, we find that, for example, in Tony Blair's New Labour Party, we are dealing with key people whose backgrounds are clearly linked to communism and Marxism. And these individuals, whether it's the Miliband brothers or it's Peter Mandelson, who have huge power and influence in Britain, but if you look at their background, it comes from a Marxist. The same is true of Mr. Gordon Brown. In his own biography, it's clearly stated that he was put into power with the help of Scottish communists. So we see the Marxist theme right the way through the New Labour project, and then in the wings we have the Conservative Party. And if we start to look at the Conservative Party, it's no coincidence that now we're back into looking at connections with the Nazi Party.
No, we have then a one-party system, so the people in control operate from both ends of the political spectrum, or the illusionary political spectrum, with the strings going up to the Rothschilds and the Rockefellers and the
bankers.
Well, that is the banksters. Is it not?
Absolutely. So we have had a political system that even before the Second World War was offering two alternatives, and those alternatives were totally controlled. Many people are now talking about the lib-lab con in UK, and that is joking about the state of the parties, the Liberal Democrats, Labour, Lib-Lab, and the con is the Conservatives. So many of the people are conned by this regime, but I'm pleased to say that really over the last year in particular, we're now seeing people that look at the leaders of the three main parties, and they realise they've come out of the same mould. If you look at Clegg from the Lib Dems, or you look at Tony Blair as our previous Prime Minister, or you look at the new boy in the Tories, Cameron, not only do they look the same, they use the same sound bites, they use the same hand movements, and there is a reason for this, and that is because they've actually been trained by exactly the same people. And this is not difficult to uncover, because if we have a look at an organisation with a Marxist background, and that is Demos, a so-called think tank in the UK, which helped set up the New Labour project.
Now Cameron, did he not promise to have a referendum and then said, well, there is to be no referendum, we're simply going to declare the abolition of British sovereignty? And he has not only not allowed the British to vote on their own sovereignty, he has jammed it down their throat and up their ass.
Well, he said repeatedly, he was reported and quoted in the newspapers as saying that he would give the nation a vote on whether we wanted to be involved with Europe, a referendum, and yesterday it became very clear that he has reneged on that promise. He has lied, just as Tony Blair lied, just as the Liberal Democrat Party lies, because all three of them are committed to locking us into the EU project.
I didn't quite hear you. Did you say that they lied?
They lied.
Then they have a legacy of lies, is that not true?
They have a complete legacy of lies, because they have repeatedly told the general public that we shouldn't worry about this, it won't take sovereignty away, when in actual fact they were giving sovereignty away at each stage.
Prime Minister Ted Heath, who initiated the original schematic laid out by Adolf Hitler to surrender the sovereignty of this nation, is buried over at Salisbury Cathedral. He told us that this was just to set up a trade agreement initially, and then he lied and the people believed him, and then they were betrayed, and this betrayal has gone from Heath all the way on down to now, where Cameron has said, well, you don't have a right to